Welcome, everybody. This is the Rotary Club of Silicon Valley, and every week we bring you the stories of people who make the world better. They improve the lives of others locally, globally, and digitally. That's a thing in Rotary International. Over 1 million people in 36,000 some odd clubs all over the planet, and ours is one of them. The Rotary Club of Silicon Valley is both online and asynchronous, which makes it a rather rare model, one that we hope that you'll kind of be curious about. Go to rotary.cool to learn more. Now, our speaker today, interesting stuff that he's going to be presenting all on his own. And as it turns out, when we launched this club in early 2015, our first speaker who wasn't a member of our club, this was the third week, this was the week of February the 9th, 2015. We had two excellent young men talking to us about hunger, and one of them was David Bobanick, who is with us now to give us an update and to talk about the kinds of things they have been doing over the last decade in order to address this very, very important issue of hunger in our communities. David, it is such a cool thing to have you back, and we welcome you to the Rotary Club of Silicon Valley.
Well, thanks so much, and thank you for heaven's sakes for saying young man. I'm gonna want to talk to you every morning, Rushton. This is great. And so the organization I'm going to talk about a little bit is Harvest Against Hunger, but the presentation today is going to be a little bit more about how we use a certain tool to make decisions as an organization. And I think that this is also a tool that can be effective for Rotarians and Rotary clubs in determining what is the impact that they are having with their investment of time, resources, ideas, and connections. And so Harvest Against Hunger, we're located here in Seattle, Washington. We primarily work within Washington State, although we do have Harvest VISTA, we'll talk about later, placed over the course of the last several years in about 8 other states across the United States. But what we try to do is to provide healthy food to people in need. We believe kind of our guiding principle is that providing healthy food to people in need builds healthier communities. And you may have seen an article that appeared earlier this year in Rotary Magazine that highlighted the work of Harvest Against Hunger. And it did it through the eyes of, and we're going to go on this journey of ripple effect mapping, but did it through the eyes of one of the young people that we had brought in as a Harvest Vista. And then it showed all of the different impacts that his activity had in a rural community on the Olympic Peninsula here in Washington State. So as an organization, we started out in 1982 as a Rotary Club project and then became a Rotary District project here in the greater Seattle area. And the idea was that there was produce that was not going to its full use, and about 40% of the produce that's grown here in the United States goes to waste. That number globally changes depending on where you are, but between 30 and 40% of the food grown goes to waste. And so as a Rotary project, the idea was to try to mitigate some of that by finding ways to get truckloads of produce that was not going to be used in Eastern Washington and get it into the hunger relief system in the greater Seattle area at the time. So connecting the dots, doing what Rotarians do best, which is using, leveraging, and expanding our networks to have an impact and to do things that we don't typically do on a daily basis. And so the core work that we now call the work of Harvest Against Hunger is moving truckload size donations of excess produce, 40,000 pounds at a time. From that, we learned that there are other ways to get produce into the hunger relief system and really decentralizing those relationships. So it's not all going through us, but is going through other organizations as well. And in order to do that, and this is where we kind of started our journey toward ripple effect mapping, the idea is that we are going to provide tools, resources, and other things that organizations need in order to empower them to be the most effective organizations in their communities in primarily getting produce into the hunger relief system. So these are our lines of business. Our core work is truckload size donations. Our Harvest Vista program places AmeriCorps Vista organizations. We built out of that a farm to community program from that, we built capacity building, and now we're building out a Washington State Gleaning Network in association with an international group of gleaning organizations. So we're pilot testing a model to build a decentralized network for gleaning and produce recovery. And then, we're going back to the Rotary DNA that we have. We do a lot of work connecting and collaborating. So finding ways to share in projects and resources and other things with nonprofit organizations. So this is really the basis of my conversation. And I apologize, this is a bit of an eye-watering image here, but it's really important. So this is the end result of an exercise called ripple effect mapping. As a nonprofit organization, and again, as Rotary clubs, we try to find ways to show the impact of our work. So when we're assessing and analyzing the resources that we're putting in place, there are outputs, there are outcomes, and there are impacts. And outputs may be thousands of pounds, millions of pounds of produce that we get in. So that's an output. The outcome is that in those communities, that food is available to be distributed. But the impact is really where we want to start to focus on our investments. And so the impact of what does it mean to get healthy food to people in need in a community? What does it mean to the long-term health? What does it mean to the capacity that children have to learn, seniors have to stay independent and healthy? And so when we started this ripple effect mapping, we're finding all kinds of ways to find quantitative measurements or metrics around the work that we do. The qualitative, the part that talks about that impact that we have, is really found through ripple effects mapping. And so it's an exercise that helps it brings in people that we are working with, so organizations that we're working with, to talk about how the investment, whatever that investment may be, a program impact, a monetary impact, or whatever investment, what is the impact long term that's had in the community? And what are the ripple effects from that? So what's that initial stone in the water, if you will, of here's an AmeriCorps VISTA resource. And then from that, those ripples come out and more broadly impact the community and continue to for years, decades sometimes, what we're finding. So our first ripple effect, I'll go back to this really quickly. So at the center of that, you see Harvest Against Hunger in that little green bubble. And then from that is the investments that we've made in various communities. Each color represents a different community or a different organization. And then you see how some of those start to even connect within themselves. So one community connection leads to another community connection. So what we found with our ripple effect mapping early on was the fact that it's fine for us to provide a truckload of produce into a community, but how can we help those communities to identify ways that they can engage local farmers, local growers, local other resources to get produce in? So we created a program called our Harvest VISTA program. Rushton mentioned the earlier presentation that we did with this club. I did that in partnership with a young man who was a Harvest VISTA with us at the time, and then his career built on, and now he's doing some pretty amazing international work. But placing an AmeriCorps VISTA at a hunger relief organization or a community organization to initially identify what are the most basic needs, what are the attributes and needs in a community, and then build a program model that's based on those attributes, those needs, so that then it becomes sustainable over the course of time in having that longer term impact. So the first ripple effect that we had was, it's a great investment to place a VISTA with a hunger relief organization, because then they create additional ripple effects. So an additional ripple effect from that is, additional ripple effect from that is farmed community. And what we found when we had these VISTA that were placed at organizations is that there are about 30,000 growers across Washington state, and we can't have a relationship with every one of those. And so the idea was that the VISTA are going to start to develop those relationships, and when they're going to build a program, we did a series of roundtables in communities where we were meeting with growers, and those growers were telling us, and this is telling us through our VISTA, that they would love to donate, especially small scale growers. But there are times when they may not have the resources available to even feed their families. So early in the season, the growers have put all their money into the fields, literally, and they're not going to see the funding coming back from that until they start to sell that product. So it's a really skinny time for growers. And so, based on that feedback that we had, we developed a program where we provide funding to hunger relief organizations. Started out as a pilot test with our VISTA program. Now it's in just about every county in Washington state where we provide funding to organizations and they can contract directly with small to medium scale growers to grow and invest in produce that they're going to distribute. So that means that the farmer gets the money up front, and then later in the season, when they need that money the most, and then later in the season, the food bank and the hunger relief organization gets that produce that they had invested in early in the season, which has been a great program. And it has created this sort of ripple effect where we tried it with 3 programs and it's grown and grown and grown. And now I believe their current number of programs across Washington that are participating in this, that we're providing those funds to in $5,000, $10,000 increments, is at about 82. So went from 3 with a Harvest Vista pilot test to now we've got 82, and we're probably going to be well over 100 by the end of this year. So that's another kind of ripple effect, and showing how one thing leads to another, leads to another. And I'll pause here because one of the most important things with that ripple effect mapping is that you listen to what your community partners are telling you. And that then, as you're doing strategic planning as an organization, gives you so much better kind of road mapping for how your investments are making an impact. And so if you find that you're putting a lot of money into a certain program, but the ripple effect from that program is minimal beyond that first investment, well, maybe you pull back from that, and then you invest in something that has a much broader, ripple effect. So the ripple effect from that farm to community program is the development of what we're now doing with Washington Gleaning Network. So our Harvest Vista, if we go back to the earlier slide, they were creating programs in communities where they're doing gleaning, produce recovery. Now they're doing some investment and purchasing from local growers in support of local growers and building out those rural food systems. We found that one of the things that we failed to foresee is that those organizations that are building up these wonderful programs they're not interconnected. And so now one of the projects that we're working on, and this is based on feedback from the last ripple effect session that we had, is creating connectivity between the organizations. So you don't have an organization in this community doing great work and an organization in this community doing great work and no connection between the two. So the Gleaning Network is a real effort, again, started by one of our VISTA, to build connections within and across these communities. So we're building a network of constellations, not stars. So all those relationships don't need to go through Harvest Against Hunger. They can go across different communities. And so this happened a couple of days ago. This happened on Wednesday. And this is one of the programs that we started as a gleaning organization several years ago. I think, Rushton, this was in the class of 2014 VISTA programs. It was Hope Link Harvest. We built it out in this community not too far, rural community not too far from Seattle. We created it's a gleaning program that goes out and works with growers in the area, but they also do the purchasing. So Hope Link is one of the programs that is now helping us to build out that Washington Gleaning Network. And the person right in the center under the K represents another organization about 2 hours away called Upper Valley Mend. Those two organizations have not previously, they're both organizations that we started, but they have not previously been working together. So now, based again on the feedback from the ripple effect mapping, we're building a connection between these two organizations, and they're doing multiple gleans together throughout Washington state. There are now about 52 programs that are part of this gleaning network. And again, this all started way back years ago when we first started placing our Harvest Vista with those organizations. So the final ripple effect that I'm going to get to, and then I'll wrap up and we'll go into questions. What do you do with all this produce? I mean, it's wonderful that we have these programs that we've built out that are bringing in extra produce, but one of the challenges with produce is it's perishable. And so when we are building programs in rural communities where they don't necessarily have the resources of refrigerators and other things, um, what do we need to do? And again, through the ripple effect mapping session, what we learned is that, hey, how about we start to build a capacity building program, partner with a couple of local foundations. Now we have a couple of state and local county government entities that are partnering with us on this as well, where we're providing small scale up to $5,000 grants to organizations to build their capacity to handle the kind of perishable product that we're bringing into them. So this is an example. This is a farm that we helped to start. That's a food bank farm. It was built on an old golf course. There were 12 Rotary clubs that were involved in funding this. There's a hoop house in the background that was used Rotary money to build out this hoop house to extend their season. But what we what we heard from them, it's called Elk Run Farm, is that when that produce comes out of the field and it's a 90-degree day or a 100-degree day, it starts to go bad pretty quickly. So we placed through that capacity building program, we placed a CoolBot refrigerator that allows them to refrigerate things coming right out of the ground. Great story about Elk Run Farm is it was one of our early VISTA programs as well. So again, you see that sort of ripple effect, and then using that methodology of how is that money invested? How then is that investment creating additional activities and additional impacts in the community to help guide us in making sure that we're being as efficient and effective in using the limited resources that we have as an organization to have that outsized impact and to help our partners everywhere to have their own outsized impact. The final thing that I'll leave you with is now we have 4 of our partners doing their own ripple effect mapping in their communities, which is really great for me because we first pioneered this ripple effect mapping with a friend from a Washington State University extension program to see if it would work, if it was a good way to show the impact of our activities and our work. And it surely has been. And so now it's being used. Right now, there are 4 other ripple effect mapping sessions going on. I suspect we're going to have another 10 here happening over the course of the next year. At the end of the day, the reason that tool is so effective is because that North Star for us of providing healthy food to people in need builds healthier communities. There's a lot going on there. There are a lot of different ways to get that product in, and it's no universal cookie cutter approach. So again, using ripple effect mapping to identify what works well in different communities helps us to know how we're making those investments. Rushton, that's the end of the presentation. That's the work of Harvest Against Hunger and how we use ripple effect mapping to do this work.
Fantastic, David. I'm gonna get us into Q&A, but before I do, I want to introduce the people we have on the call. Those of you who are part of the recording, please wave when I call your name. In Houston, Texas, member Rory Olson and Buddy. In Southern California on Catalina Island, our newest member, Ernie Rodriguez. On the eastern side of Italy, our treasurer, Cecilia Babkirk. Cecilia, go ahead and get a wave in there. All right, don't be fooled by that San Francisco shot behind her. So my name's Rushton. I live in San Jose, California. It is always fun to be able to talk about interesting ideas, both in terms of what they can do and the systems that allow them to do those things. So, David, I want to start the questions with this question about how you think about the system. The system seems built on partnerships. Ripple effect mapping is in one respect a way to evaluate those partnerships. And I'm curious about the mechanics of that. How do you talk through with your team the idea of what is it that we place where on this map in order to better understand its value to the larger whole?
Yeah, that's a great question. And full transparency, we have a team of 6, including me. So we're not a huge organization, but you hit on it at the very beginning of your question. It's all about partnerships. There are a lot of organizations, and it's about finding ways to make more effective and more durable connections between organizations. So thinking about, there's an organization here, there's an organization here. What's that connective tissue between the two? And how do you strengthen that? So how do you strengthen that, the ways that the connections are made so that you're making both organizations stronger? And it's a one-to-one relationship that we may have with another organization, and it's a one-to-many, and it's a many-to-many. So there are a lot of different layers of relationships that happen, and I think that finding ways to strengthen the area where those connections can be made. So when we literally have that great big map that I showed you at the beginning, we have that up on the wall. And that's like the thing that we all look at on an ongoing basis. And so the person that runs our Harvest Vista program sees the impact that that program is having. She can look and see what's happening in the communities. Farm to community, same way. The capacity building, same way. The other thing that we do that's really, really important is we don't just do the ripple effect mapping once and then we're done. We also have monthly cohort check-ins and calls. And again, it's not a Harvest Against Hunger is going to be doing all the talking in this. It is, we may have one or two things, and then we open it up to all of the participants so that they can talk amongst themselves. And from that, we then learn how to modify the program. What's working in this community? How can it be modified to work in this community? So there's this ongoing feedback loop that we have. And also appreciating through ripple effect mapping that we don't have all the answers. I mean, that's the whole idea of this process, is that we're learning from folks what they're able to do with the resources that we gave them, that investment that we gave them. What are they able to do in their community with that? And it's different every time, right? There's no, well, we know if we make this investment, these are a likely set of outcomes that are going to happen, but we never know specifically what that outcome is going to be because there's so much dynamism in that. You never know who's going to be involved in a project in a community, and where it may go because of that person, individual, or organization's involvement. Does that answer your question? That felt like a journey.
All my conversations feel like journeys. So
Yeah.
there.
All right.
The idea of a small team, and an advantage of having a small team
Yeah.
is that you can craft a system as a team. So it's one thing to understand this particular visual approach to evaluating the effects of one's work, the effect of a team's work. It is another thing to get people on board with thinking along those lines so that it becomes a part of the ongoing conversation. Is there a training of some kind, informal or otherwise, that you do with your people and your
So
partners in order to get people thinking about how they will use this effectively?
yeah, so it's really interesting. I mean, and I would even I think the example that I'll use is our board of directors. So we've got a staff of 6, but we've got a board of directors of 20. And so larger board of directors, and many of them are Rotarians. So many of them are used to kind of working and finding ways to work in partnerships. It takes a little bit of time because we're not just talking about, as an organization, we don't just add programs. We don't bolt on, additional staff in order to do things. That's just kind of goes against the model that we've tried to create. And so it is one of the challenges is helping people, whether they're staff or a board, understand how all of these layers work together and how the interconnectivity of our programming happens. So we brought on a new development director. She's not new anymore. She's new to us because she's been there for 2 years. We have staff that have been there for many years. And it took her a good 6 months before she fully understood how all of these partnerships work together. Now she's a great champion for the organization, but she really was a little bit frustrated just trying to learn how to tell that story and how to express it. Yeah, and again, so when we're trying to bring on new board members, the whole idea is we want them to just sit and listen and understand how we function as a nonprofit organization, as a connector first. And then once they had that better, fuller, deeper understanding of it, they start to see their role in that. It's the same way with the staff. The other thing that we do is we have weekly check-ins where nobody runs our staff meetings. Our staff meetings are, what's happening with a certain program at a certain time. And so it's a very collaborative, even across our own programming. With our staffing, it's a very collaborative approach.
Just yesterday, I was speaking, as we record, I was speaking to the Rotary Club of Los Altos here in
Oh,
the Bay Area
mm-hmm.
about the interconnection between stories and strong programs, and how thinking about the story actually allows you to strengthen the program. And then you have to do a good job of telling the story of what you did in order to think again about what it is you want to do to build the program, right?
Right.
And I hear that in the story you tell about ripple effect mapping. You also mentioned that you've got this board of 20, a lot of them are Rotarians. I want to I want to broach the idea that Rotarians are a particular kind of support
Mm-hmm.
for organized community efforts. And what I mean by that is that these are people with absolutely with a heart for making good things happen. These are people who know that it is important to gather the talents and treasure and time of members in order to make good things happen in all sorts of ways. You have had this perspective on what it means to get the support of Rotarians and Rotary clubs. You have been or are, I'm trying to remember, Rotarian yourself.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah, have been for years.
cool. What are some of the challenges that Rotarians have understanding how to think more scalably,
Mm.
sustainably about a complex program like food waste in terms of how it ripples out into so many different elements of a community? I can imagine that there are a lot of people who of all descriptions, Rotary and otherwise, who want to make a difference in a very focused way, and often that way of looking at it gets us away from the complexity needed to understand what is going to be sustainable as a solution.
Yeah, well, I mean, first off, I don't know that this cup of coffee is big enough for that question. That's a big involved question, but I think it gets to something that's really fundamental. I think about Rotary is when we're first looking at how do we use our club resources, for example, um, one of the standard first steps is you do a community needs assessment, right? And I think that community needs assessment will at least give you some indication of what organization, and you should be partnering with other organizations to do that, obviously. But I think that's a really good grounding and starting point for what are some needs and who's taking care of things in certain areas. Like what's being done well by this organization over here. We don't need to do that, right? We need to find the weakest link in that chain and zone in and focus on that one. And so that's another thing that we think about from our perspective as an organization is there are organizations that we work with that are doing great work. We don't need to have a warehouse as an organization because there are organizations that are already doing that. But what are the gaps? What are the weak links between that warehouse and the farm? And like how do we start working on that? So I think that and again, I know I'm being really specific about how we're doing it here with Harvest Against Hunger and food waste, but I think more broadly and generally with Rotary, there's that I don't want I guess there's a little bit of what you could call a friction when it comes to where do you get started with a project and then when do you let it go, right? And so that the notion that, and again, this is kind of our approach, the notion that you're making an important investment to empower a community, another organization, a partner to be better than they were before your relationship started with them. I think that's really a good approach that we can take as Rotarians because we don't necessarily, as Rotarians, want to own massive projects, right? We want to Other organizations are doing that, and that's great. I think our superpower as Rotarians is to figure out ways that we're making those other organizations more successful. So again, it's like, you know,
Uh,
we're we don't have to own it the whole way through. It's how do we make that investment? How do we solidify the links in the chain to let those other organizations be the best that they can be at the work?
I have to compliment you on an excellent answer to a convoluted question. Well done. Um,
Thank you.
so, so one more question that came in that I'd like to kind of wind our recording down with. There are plenty of people who are not Rotarians, but are young people who care about making a difference in the lives of others in their communities who watch our recordings.
Hmm.
You have ended up in a position running an organization that is doing some really tremendous work, that is creating systems. The ripple effect mapping is, I think, a perfect example of that, that could be of value for addressing problems all over the world. So you're getting to do this work that is intensely meaningful. How do you talk to young people about how they think about their own careers, their
Hmm.
time, their volunteer time, perhaps, so that they can understand the joy and meaning that comes from doing work on a regular basis that helps others? Because that's something that often we understand in Rotary, and a lot
Mm-hmm.
of people desperately need
Yeah.
out in the larger community.
Yeah, I mean, so there are going to be a couple of different points here, but I always think of Rotarians more in terms of less in terms of demographics, which I think sometimes with Rotary International we can get a little wrapped around the axle of saying these are the demographics, these are the sets of people that we want to bring in, this is the age group or whatever it may be. I really think of Rotarians and the work that we do, because there's so many of us around, is more of a psychographic, right? And so it doesn't matter what age you are. It doesn't matter what, where you are in your career path, but it is all about service. And each of us on this call, and probably everybody that's going to listen to this, is interested in service, and we're all coming at it from a different background. We're all coming at it from a different age, or whatever it may be. So I think that there is. So now I'll get to the second part of my answer. Um, when it comes to like our VISTA program, we, we were a little short-sighted, and last week I met with the CEO of AmeriCorps, and one of the things that we talk about with AmeriCorps is that it's such a great leadership training opportunity. That public service, that work that people are doing, and we always saw Vista as kind of, what is the impact of Vista are going to have wherever they're placed, as opposed to what is the impact that doing this program is going to have on the Vista themselves, and their journey to becoming a leader and an effective person. And we kind of looked back after several years of doing this program and looked at all the Vista, and we've got people that are now leaders in their communities, um, executive directors of nonprofit organizations, or city county council members, or things like that. That I think it really getting involved in service was the start of that path to their leadership journey, which, when it comes to Rotary, that's a stepping stone into the world of service. I mean, through Rotary, I can get involved. I can go glean over at Elk Run Farm later this afternoon, or I can get involved in a water project halfway around the world, right? And I'm going to be directly involved in that. And so, I think that's that's the answer, is when you're a younger person starting out your career, get involved in a service activity, and that's sort of a path. That's a stepping stone into that path of leadership and who you want to be, 10 years in the future, or whatever it may be.
I love it. And I love that we get a chance to meet people who have such interesting perspectives on the kinds of things that are possible in our communities. Thank you all who are watching this recording for taking your time to be excited and energized and empowered by the kinds of ideas that we go searching for all the time. If you are visiting us on our Rotary page, our Silicon Valley Rotary.com page, again, the shortcut Rotary.cool, And you will find there a discuss section, a forum where you can leave messages about the kinds of things that prompted thoughts in you as you watch this recording or any other element of our meeting. You might be watching this on our YouTube channel. Feel free to click like and to share it with others. You know, we think that this kind of inspiration is the kind of stuff that the world needs more of. You might be listening to this as part of one of our podcast series, and in doing that, we hope you will also feel like sharing is caring, and that you will get that kind of message out there as well. As we always like to finish these recordings, we hand it back to our final speaker with whatever it is that he, she, or they think might be the thought that you really need to walk away from the recording with. So, with that, David, I will hand it back to you for the final word.
Thanks. Goodness, the final word. I think, and I've talked about this program. I have really thinking about it from an individual perspective, just humbled by the people that I've had the privilege and the honor to get to know and to work with for this many years that I've been doing this in different communities. I think that again, as Rotarians, we have a we it's important to do the service work that we do, but I also think that it's important for us to approach it when we're doing it as not having all the answers. Approach it from a position of humility where we want to reach out. We want to learn from people. I mean, I learn as much from a person running a small food bank in a rural part of Washington state as I do from a congressperson that we may be meeting with or something like that. So I think that, for me personally, the amount of growth that I have able to have had over the course of my career here has been being open and humble and listening to and learning from so many people from so many walks of life that we come across.
An excellent thought to finish on. Thank you so much, David. Thank you, everyone, and we will see you next week.